Welcome back. It is time for Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast covering your Las Vegas Raiders. Scott Branson, Mo Moten with you. We're going to dive into the latest news and views around the Raiders. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, please do us a favor. Hit subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts or get your audio. Would appreciate that. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you. Watch there as well by subscribing and hitting the notifications bell. We're going to get right into it now. Josh Jacobs speaks. Not only that, but of course, Mostradamus again. If you watch the show, and Mo, you tweeted out, by the way, Mo is the national NFL correspondent for covering the NFL on Bleacher Report. He's also a Raiders columnist for sportsnot.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Momoton, MoeMoton. I am at LV Goalie. The show is SNB Today on Twitter as well. Mo, last week, you said, hey, watch Josh Jacobs' Twitter handle. We were talking about not being worried about him because he couldn't get to camp, obviously mini camp, because he does not have technically a contract because he has not signed his tender for his franchise tag, right? So we knew that. We talked about it. You said, watch his social media. And on cue, a few days later, he tweets this. He says, quote, sometimes it's not about you. We got to do it for the ones after us. So clearly, Josh Jacobs is talking about his own situation and getting paid. First of all, I want to get your reaction to your prediction around, or I should say prediction, your statement that we should watch for his social media because he likes to say things on social media. Some players don't do it. They keep their business completely private. Others like to kind of subtweet or, in this case, directly tweet about his situation. What was your reaction when you saw it? I know you weren't surprised, but overall, your reaction to what Josh Jacobs said and what it means for his possibility of signing that tag and coming back to the Raiders in time for camp at the end of next month.
Now, originally I said, if you remember, I was on the show and I said, wake me up when training camp starts when it comes to this Josh Jacobs situation. I should have said, wake me up when he starts tweeting. Because like I said, he's vocal on Twitter. So based on his tweet, and some people are going to say, how do you know he was talking about his contract? Because I know that's what some people in the chat are going to say. He responded to a Raider fan under that original tweet. And the Raider fan basically said, get back on the field, sign your contract, get back to the team. He said, basically you're a fan, so you want to understand the situation I'm in. I'm paraphrasing, but of course that's kind of what he was alluding to. And I will say my quick reaction is we could possibly be headed for a holdout. And if you're on Bleacher Report, I'm going to have a piece coming out on Wednesday that breaks down the possibility of a Josh Jacobs holdout and how I feel about. Is it more likely that he holds out? Is it more likely that he holds in, or do the Raiders trade him? And I'll get into those options in the Bleacher Report piece. But right now, I would say it's 50-50 whether he holds out or not. Now, of course, the first thing we have to say is that there's a deadline. Some people say it's July 15th. Some people say it's July 17th. Depending on where you look, it's the 15th or the 17th, whatever the case is. There is a deadline that the Raiders can sign Josh Jacobs to a multi-year contract, being that he's a franchise tag player or designated for the franchise tag because he hasn't signed it yet. But after that date, continue to look at Josh Jacobs' Twitter handle. See how he feels about whether if he comes to a deal, an agreement with the Raiders, all is fine and dandy. But if no deal is met, and he starts to have more of these tweets about got to do it for the running backs, got to do it for the guys behind me, more likely chance that you're going to see a holdout. Now, the question is how long will he hold out if he doesn't get that deal?
Correct. But here's my take on it. I know a lot of fans won't like it, but I don't think he has any legs to stand on. Okay, because you look at the situation. We just talked about Dalvin Cook getting released in Minnesota. Dalvin Cook had over 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns last year. Yes, he didn't lead the league like Josh Jacobs. Okay. And again, this is not about not liking Josh Jacobs or the player he is or the fact that he carried that Raider offense for most of last year. I'm not denying any of that. But my point here is we also saw Saquon Barkley, who's threatening to basically hold out. He has not signed his tag either, correct? And we've heard the reports, Saquon Barkley wants upwards of $14 million a year. He's not going to get 14 million a year from the Giants. And Josh Jacobs is not going to get 14 million a year from the Raiders either. The position is what it is. He talks about got to do it for the ones after us. But do you think that any team is going to be the one NFL team that says, okay, we're going to set the running back market now at 14 million a season? I don't think so, Mo. We've talked about the reasons why the position isn't valued. People can argue that running back should be a higher value and they should make more money, but that's not what the market dictates. And this is where you have to separate the emotion from the business. Fans, yes. And don't tell me you went on NFL Network and you saw a bunch of ex-players talking about how Josh Jacobs needs the money. Of course, the players are going to have one another's back, even if they're retired. This is something we see every time there's a contract situation, the owners versus the players. The point is, Josh Jacobs, had his option been exercised last year, would have only made $8 million this year. Okay, so he's already, in essence, getting a premium because the position's at 10. The same can be said for Saquon Barkley. So saying he's doing it for the people after us, go talk to your union officials who negotiated the latest collective bargaining agreement and that controls all of the tag information, the contract. My point is, I'm not saying a guy shouldn't get paid what he deserves, but what you deserve in your own mind versus what you deserve based on what the league is paying out to running backs is a very different story.
It is. And if you've watched, I don't know if you've seen it, but Saquon Barkley came out and he had a long answer about, his contract situation with the Giants. And basically his message was, I'm a big part of what the Giants did last year and a big part of their offense. Mm-hmm. And basically Daniel Jones didn't pick it up to the end of the year, and I had to carry the load. And Josh Jacobs has a similar argument. He actually mentioned Josh Jacobs in his response. Josh Jacobs was the engine of the Raiders offense for the middle part of last year. But to your point, the market is what it is. And Saquon Barkley also mentioned this, that Miles Sanders, because he didn't hit the market, because Josh Jacobs didn't hit the market, it hurts Miles Sanders because if those guys were to get paid 10, 14, 15 million, the Miles Sanders would have probably made more. Because he could say, well, I ran for this many yards or I ran for that many yards, had that many touchdowns. And I'm comparing, not as good as those guys, but I'm maybe on tier 2. And he could have probably banked maybe 8, 9 million instead of 6, 7 million. So I get it. But again, to your point, if you hit the market as a running back now, look at what happened with Dalvin Cook. And I wrote a piece about this on Sportsnaut. If Dalvin Cook signs with his next team, he gets more than the franchise tag, 10.1 million, which I doubt. That's good news for Barkley and Jacobs. If he doesn't, if he's under 10 million, that's bad news for Barkley and Jacobs. I'm not saying he sets the bar for them, but remember, Dalvin Cook has run for over 1,100 yards in 4 consecutive seasons. I believe he's a 3-time Pro Bowler. So if a player with those accolades and those numbers gets less than 10 million, Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs, as you said, don't have strong legs to stand on because they're comparable players to Dalvin Cook, even though they're both younger.
Right. And again, I want to reiterate, this is not any criticism of Josh Jacobs as the player because his numbers last year speak for themselves. He had a great season. He carried that offense. There's no question. Again, though, it is a business. And here's the point I want to make as well, which is, you talked about setting the market. Do you think Dave Ziegler wants to be the guy that folds and says, okay, yeah, we'll give you whatever you want? No. The other information, and I know, Mo, I think you mentioned it in one of your pieces, or we talked about it at the very least, which was if you look at NFL running backs, even the best running backs, you go back to when Todd Gurley was playing well, you name the guy, it doesn't matter who it was. The reason why they always try to get the most money when they do now, because the numbers are overwhelming on the production going down after the first contract. Okay. So that is why teams are not willing to give that money because the data over the last 10, 15, even 20 years shows once you get past year 5, it's diminishing returns. Okay. So now if Josh Jacobs in his first 2 seasons won the rushing title twice, he might have been in a good position to negotiate a 5-year deal, gets him to 7 years or maybe even 8. And he would have had more leverage. But overwhelmingly, the league is not going to go there. And so I just don't understand. That's why you see the holding in situations that you do, right? We saw it last year with Darren Waller, and it worked for him, right? He got a contract. Arguably, yes, Josh Jacobs deserves it more than Darren Waller did. But that time has passed. And again, he's going to make $2 million more. He could, if he steps away, if he holds out, to me, it's a bad precedent for him because it's not going to work out. To your point, if Dalvin Cook signs for $7.5 million or $8 or $9 million, Josh Jacobs isn't going to get much more than that. So you're actually going to lose money. I rather see if you're negotiating in good faith with the team, and we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We have no idea. I'm not going to guess. But if I'm him, you got to show good faith. I'm not expecting him to show up at minicamp. He doesn't need to show up to minicamp. No big deal. He's not under contract anyway. He couldn't go. But you sign that tender, you come in and you're like, hey, I got a tweaked hamstring. Whatever your reasoning is, that's what the new model is. I can understand it. Okay, we're working on a deal. I'm going to give you until week 1 of the regular season. And I know they have to go to July 15th, but yeah, I could sign my tag and then we could say, sign the tag. We're going to keep negotiating. But he's not doing that. He's taking the other tack at this point. We don't know. Another week could change everything. You just don't know. But I'm sitting here thinking that he's not helping himself. At the same time, I can respect the fact that he wants to stand on his principle. And if that's going to be his principle, I just don't know financially to say it's for the ones after us. I don't think he might think that sort of. I don't think it's that genuine. You got to worry about you. This might be the last time you get a contract. And if that's the case, if you're not meeting your number, try to do something or at least show up, play on your tag, make your $10 million. And then if you're that good and you have another great year, then you're on the free market next year and you see what you get.
I'll play devil's advocate, not to your point, but a lot of people are saying, Josh Jacobs, don't hold out or sit out a season because look what happened to Le'Veon Bell. If you remember, Le'Veon Bell missed the entire 2018 season with the Pittsburgh Steelers because he wanted a new deal, wound up, again, missing the entire season and then signing with the Jets afterward. The Steelers had moved on with James Conner. What I will say is that Josh Jacobs and even Saquon Barkley's situation is not comparable to Le'Veon Bell simply because the Pittsburgh Steelers had an all-pro wide receiver in Antonio Brown before he went wild, crazy, out of his mind. They had Juju Smith-Schuster, pretty decent wide receiver, and James Conner came up behind Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell was a second-round pick. James Conner was a third-round pick. James Conner became a Pro Bowler in absence of Le'Veon Bell. The Giants and Raiders, well, the Giants particularly, don't have those type of playmakers outside of Saquon Barkley. Daniel Jones, will see what he looks like, but his numbers aren't impressive. They have Darren Waller now, but as we know, as Raider fans know, Darren Waller's hurt a lot. So if Darren Waller gets hurt, who's Daniel Jones going to throw to? I know they got Isaiah Hodgins there. He's coming up. He's okay. Darius Slayton. Those guys are number 3 wide receivers on most NFL teams. In the Raiders sense, yes, they do have Devontae Adams. They signed Jacoby Myers, so they have some perimeter weapons. They drafted Michael Mayer, your guy out of Notre Dame. So they have some perimeter weapons. But if Josh Jacobs is not there, you're handing the ball to Zamir White, McCormick, Britton Brown. Those guys didn't get a lot of run because of how well Josh Jacobs played last year. So you don't know what you're getting at the running back position if you let Josh Jacobs walk. Now, the other option is, and Pro Football Talks Mike Flores suggested this, is what if the Raiders were to sign Dalvin Cook for less than the franchise tag is worth on Josh Jacobs and let Josh Jacobs and basically rescind the franchise tag and let Josh Jacobs walk? That would be a wild scenario. I don't think it happened because
I don't think so either.
Josh Jacobs knows the system already. He's a leader. He was a leader in that locker room. I think it sets a bad precedent to rescind the franchise tag from a leader in your locker room and then sign a veteran free agent for less. To me, it just seems like a cost-cutting move where I understand football is a business, but you want to be careful about how you – not that the head coaches are beholden to players, but you have to be careful with the locker room, especially after the season that the Raiders had last year. You don't want to fracture that locker room and let a leader go and bring in a veteran. That's a poor move on the Raiders' part if they were to go that route.
Yeah, and Jacobs is a good leader. We saw him emerge more so last year as a leader in that locker room in year 4. So you got to give him credit for that. And again, in closing, I'm not taking sides here. I just think the team has the leverage. To your point, and the scenario you just outlined with Dalvin Cook, I hope it doesn't happen either for all the reasons you said. But the fact that it could has to play in the mind of Josh Jacobs' agent and himself because they have options. Now, to your point, if they don't do that and they just go with the guys on the roster like Zeus and Brittain Brown and all those guys, yeah, it's more of an – but you're already sort of in a mini rebuild, I know, and it wouldn't make Devontae Adams very happy, I'm sure. But I just think here, again, not taking sides, I just don't think Josh Jacobs has a lot of leverage here. And clearly, if they were close to a deal, he wouldn't have tweeted something like that. If you're close to a deal, you're happy, your agent's telling you, hey, we're getting close, don't say anything, we're going to get done. So clearly the Raiders and Josh Jacobs, based on what he said publicly, are probably not close to a deal, which tells you where they're at. So we'll have to see all it plays out and how, whether or not it was a good or a bad strategy for Josh Jacobs to speak out. All right. Go ahead. Close it out. Yep.
Is that when players are quiet and you don't hear anything about contract negotiations, usually that's a good sign that there's communication between the two sides and there's exchanging of contract numbers. Once it goes public and you hear players speak out publicly, like Saquon Barkley did, or use social media to kind of posture their position, usually that means they're posturing their position because they're trying to get some favor and some leverage on their side. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, we'll see how it all rolls out. All right. We're going to take our first break. When we come back here on Silver and Black today, we're going to talk about another Raiders player that most said probably would be gone maybe by this time, but chances are that might not happen. And there was a report recently about this player, and we'll talk about that when we come back. You're listening to Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. We're coming back right after these words. Welcome back. Segment number 2 here on Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. Please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. Also on YouTube, hit the notifications bell after you hit subscribe. By the way, later tonight, yes, if you're listening to us in the morning on your commute, later tonight, the Las Vegas, or I should say Vegas, Golden Knights can close out the Stanley Cup Championship at home at T-Mobile Arena, right off the Las Vegas Strip there. Las Vegas might get its second professional championship. Of course, the WNBA Las Vegas Aces won the championship just this past spring, and now the Golden Knights get a chance. Just imagine if they win the Stanley Cup, which to me, as far as the men's sports go, it is the most difficult championship to win because of the length of the playoffs and the physicality of the game, of course. But it would be something, and I wonder how much pressure that'll put on the Raiders to get better fast when your brother franchise or sister franchise, however you want to put it, right down the street might win a championship in only its first, half a decade in Las Vegas. But exciting times in Las Vegas tonight. There might be a lot of partying going on, more than usual, of course, on the Las Vegas Strip.
Quick, Scott, say something nice about the Las Vegas Aces before I go into my diatribe.
The Las Vegas Aces are the first Las Vegas professional sports team to win a championship. I say Major League Sports. For those of you,
I went to see some pom-pom waving, but I guess you can't go that far. But no, seriously though, I look, the Vegas Knights came in guns blazing. I believe they were a playoff team their first year in Vegas.
They went to the Stanley Cup Finals. Cup Finals, yeah.
The Raiders didn't come into Vegas like that. So I think the expectations between the Knights, I get your point, but I feel like the expectations of the Knights and the Raiders aren't on the same tier just because of how the first year of the Knights went and how the first year in Vegas for the Raiders went. And they're just not on the same expectation level. But I will say, when you have championships going around your area and you're coming off a 6-11 season with a star wide receiver, people start to talk like, okay, we got the Knights. Fans start to talk. Locals start to talk. Okay, we got the Knights. The Aces look like they can win another one. They made some moves in the offseason. We could get another professional team in the near future, maybe not the Athletics, but maybe we get another team because you heard about how that went. But, who knows? Like, if you're the Raiders and you are in the National Football League, and we all know football is king, you don't want to be, and this is no disrespect to the NHL and WNBA, but you don't want to be the third team in your market behind those franchises.
No.
Because the NFL is so big and so grand, you would think that fans, when you go to Vegas, automatically they're Raider fans. And like, well, the Raiders have been playing so well, so not as many fans as you would think in this area.
Well, and if you look at the sports too, I mean, you're talking about hockey's the number 4 sport behind football, basketball, and baseball. And then the WNBA, I don't even know where it's at. I'm gonna assume it's not in the top 10. It might be top 10. I don't know yet. But as far as spectator sports go, that is. So yeah, that's the thing. It's like, imagine you're the only other major league team in the city, and Yes, you have 3 championships from when you weren't in the city, so they don't really count. They count for the franchise, but not for Las Vegas. So it'll be interesting. But I will be watching late into the evening to watch the Golden Knights. Hopefully they close it out at home. And I know fans that are fans of both teams will enjoy that tonight. Speaking of the Strip, there's a lot of slot machines on the Strip, Mo. And the Raiders have their own slot machine. Of course, Hunter Renfrow is a guy we've talked a lot about with the Raiders loading up on slot receivers. We both agreed that his time in Las Vegas, due to his contract, primarily because the Raiders have other needs, they could do other things with the money, that he might be on his way out of town. In fact, I think you pegged it at about a 50-50, or it was higher than that. No, you said
90,
like 70,
90,
80, 90%.
I went as high as 95% at one point.
Right, 95%. And it may still happen. We don't know. But this week, The Athletic, Deshaun Reed reported that there wasn't anybody really hot after Hunter Renfrow, that he wasn't in demand, and that what he was hearing was that there was no real market for him. Number one, are you surprised by that? And number two, that can change when we get into camp, can it?
Number one, it doesn't surprise me, even though I expect Hunter Renfrow to be moved at some point. It doesn't surprise me because of his contract. Remember, the Raiders gave him an extension last offseason. I believe it's fully guaranteed this year. It was fully guaranteed after the third day of the 2023 league year. If you remember, I had put out a tweet as soon as the league year switched in March. I said, hey, the Raiders could make a move because if Hunter Renfrow isn't moved, his contract becomes fully guaranteed, and it was on a Friday. He passed that deadline, and people kind of breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, they're not going to trade Hunter Renfrow. We passed the third day of the league year. He's staying. He's going to be on the roster in 2023. But then if you look at his contract, yes, it is fully guaranteed, but it's not lucrative to the point where there's no way they're going to move him with that contract because he's not paid as one of the top 15 wide receivers in the league. Yes, it's a fully guaranteed deal, but it's not like he's making Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown money. Right. He's in that like the third tier when it comes to payments on yearly salary. So to your second point, I think that, yes, it could change. I don't wish injuries on any team or any person. But every year we see this happen. A wide receiver goes down. A tight end goes down. One of your primary pass catchers goes down, and the team needs to replace that production. What do? They call up other teams who may be willing to part ways with decent football players. And we all know Hunter Renfrow, 2 years ago, over 1,000 years receiving, when the Raiders had issues with injuries of their own, he stepped up and he was their main pass catcher. So I'm sure teams took note of that. So if there are injuries, Hunter Renfrow, the Raiders could probably get an early call. Even if there aren't any injuries, I feel like that whole thing where his market doesn't exist could change because as we get close to the season, there are cuts, there are trades, there are other moves, there are guys that maybe not panning out as teams thought they would. They're going to be looking for wide receivers, and we all know wide receivers is a premium position now. So I would still say, while I'm not 95% sure now that Hunter Renfrow gets moved, I still put it at a pretty high percentage. I'm still at about 80, 85% because of how the Raiders roster is constructed right now.
Right. And both of us have been Hunter Renfrow fans. Of course, everyone who's been listening to the show for a long time knows that he was a weekly contributor when I was on Raider Nation Radio. We had him on the show every week to talk about the game prior and, of course, preview the game coming up. So we love Hunter Renfrow. But the elephant in the middle of the room here, believe it or not, is, yes, Hunter Renfrow had the 2021 1,000 yards. He had 9 touchdowns, right? Last year gets injured. If you look at the career of Jacoby Myers, I'm not saying Jacoby Myers is a perennial all-pro or anything. But if you look at Jacoby Myers' stats, been pretty consistent. Outside of 300 yards his first season, I think he's had over 700 or 800 yards per season in the NFL. So actually, Jacoby Myers, you can get into the argument here, which is like, okay, you could say Hunter Renfrow last year got hurt. But if you look at the record there and the stats, Jacoby Myers is a pretty good receiver. I know people don't want to admit that because they love Hunter Renfrow. But if I'm looking at it and you look at it from just a pure numbers and consistency perspective, he's been more consistent.
The one knock against Jacoby Myers is that he's not very good in the red zone. I remember he went a record number of games played without scoring a touchdown. Then he finally broke through that season ago, I believe. So not much of a red zone threat, and that's been the Achilles heel for the Raiders in recent years. I believe Hunter Renfrow has probably had 9 touchdowns. But remember, he had that continuity with Derek Carr, who's no longer in Las Vegas, is now in
Right.
New Orleans. How will Hunter Renfrow click with Jimmy Garoppolo? But I want to present a situation to you, Scott. And I know, and as you said, I know fans love Hunter Renfrow. But would you rather trade Hunter Renfrow for a starter on your defense, wherever it is, safety, cornerback, linebacker, defensive end, defensive tackle?
Linebacker.
Would you rather trade Hunter Renfrow for a starter on defense or have Hunter Renfrow on your roster at his current contract with 15 catches at the end of the season?
Yeah. And that's the thing you bring. It's the right question to ask, Mo. Absolutely. The other thing there too is if you look at the way Hunter Renfrow, especially, and nothing, I don't take away anybody's accomplishments. I mean, he had a great 2021, but again, look at 2021. Devontae Adams wasn't there. You had, of course, Darren Waller was in and out of the lineup and banged up most of the year, so he wasn't 100%. So he was kind of option one a lot of the times. Now you get on a team where you have four options, you have a stud rookie tight end. Suddenly, what are his chances to put up numbers like that? I don't think they're as significant. I think that year was a little bit of an aberration just because they had to use him. He had to get more balls because Derek Carr didn't have many options. So you take that into the equation and you're right. I think he's more expendable. And if he does get traded, wish him well. I hope he succeeds and I hope he gets 1,000 yards somewhere. But I just think that despite the fact that the reports are there isn't much of a market now, I agree with you 100%. Get into camp, people get hurt, trades happen, and suddenly the phone will start ringing.
Absolutely. And what I mean by the 15 catches thing is Devontae, first of all, and I pointed this out in the piece, when Jimmy Garoppolo was successful with the San Francisco 49ers, the 49ers had the fourth fewest pass attempts in both those seasons. Yes. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to throw the ball a whole lot. So when you factor in the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo may not throw the ball a whole lot, you got Devontae Adams there. You drafted Michael Mayer in the second round as a pass-catching tight end. You signed Jacoby Myers. How many targets is Hunter Renfrow really going to get? And this is why I say he's not going to have that many catches in the season. So instead of having him be the third, fourth option in your passing offense, that's a little more conservative with Jimmy Garoppolo, I'd rather trade him and get a starter on defense. You get more out of it that way. And that's my point. It's not that I want to trade Hunter Renfrow and get rid of him. I don't like him. It's how can it help the Raiders his value? How can this trade value help the Raiders down the road? Is it better to have him as your third or fourth best receiver, or trade him for a starter on your defense to help your defense, which has struggled the past several years, I should say.
Yeah, and with all of the players who've agreed to restructuring, notice that he hasn't been one of them. That's not his fault. I'm sure they haven't reproached him, but that also speaks volumes to me, because if they wanted to keep him and they thought that they needed to keep him, they could have also done that too. They could have restructured his deal to reduce that cap hit and free up some cash. And they just didn't do that. So we'll have to see. And you know what? I think it would be better for Hunter Renfrow, to your point, go to a team where they're flinging the ball over a lot more, and he's going to have more opportunity, and he's going to be happier to show what he can do. So maybe it'll work out for both sides. I know it would be hard for Raider Nation to say goodbye to him, but at the end of the day, I think that's what's going to happen as we see the Raiders load up on slot receivers. All right, that's the close of segment 2. When we come back to close out the show, Tom Brady talk. Oh, no. Yes. Has nothing to do with the fumble. Has nothing to do with him coming back. It's a different story. We're going to talk about Tom Brady, Raiders owner, right after this. You're listening to Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Stay right where you are. Welcome back. Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Mo Moten, Scott Goldbranson with you. We're talking Raiders football. Please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. We appreciate that. Hello to everybody on YouTube. We appreciate you watching as well. And we're back, and we are talking Tom Brady. Yes, Mo, Tom Brady, that guy, the GOAT. I know Raider fans don't like to say that, but he is. You got to go with that. But Tom Brady, no, he's not coming back. No, he's not going to play quarterback. But Tom Brady this week, Mo, spoke about his ownership. He got asked in an interview why or how he felt about and to talk about his ownership of the Raiders. So I'm going to put that up on the screen for YouTube viewers. And for those of you listening on the audio side, on the podcast side, I'll read it to you. Now, there's one sentence in here I know that Raider fans won't like, so I'll start with that one. It starts with, here's Tom Brady speaking, quote, "I grew up in the Bay Area. My favorite team was the 49ers. Okay, I know. If you're still with me, the team across the Bay was the Raiders. And you know, they're an iconic NFL franchise. When I look at a lot of the people that have impacted the NFL over a long period of time in the most positive way, former Raiders owner and GM Al Davis is one of them. And he's not with us anymore, but I've heard incredible stories. And then the opportunity came about to become a minority owner in the Raiders. It was a dream come true for me. I'll be playing a very passive role. This is something that I'm interested in doing for the rest of my life. This is not something that I've been into for a year or 2 years. So there you go, Mo. He's talking about the ownership of the Raiders, besides saying that he was a 49er fan as a kid. It happens. But it's interesting because he says clearly he wants to be a passive owner. So any thoughts of him going down there to train with the quarterbacks? And I said this on a couple of shows ago. I said he's got a situation, divorce. He's got kids. He wants to spend as much time as a kid. So he'll probably be in for game days, and that's about it. But it'll be interesting, though, because his point about wanting to be involved with the game for the rest of his life, and as an owner, he can do that, even as a passive owner. I'm interested from your point of view, outside of his playing ability and what he did in his career, which is amazing. What else does he bring to the table? If you're a Raiders fan and you're really trying to find out why it's good that he's a minority owner, what springs to mind for you?
Well, the first thing that obviously has to come to mind is he was the centerpiece of a dynasty in New England. So if anything, and I've seen Raider fans say this, that if he can just, I'm not saying, Tom Brady's King Midas or anything, but he was part of a team that, and I know people want to bring up the stuff that happened, Deflategate and all of that stuff, Spygate. I get it. But he understands what it looks like or what it's supposed to look like. And a lot of fans have criticized Mark Davis for his football decisions, right? So if Mark Davis is now leaning on a guy who's done it on the field, and that doesn't make Tom Brady a great, part owner, because we've seen, Michael Jordan out there with the Charlotte Hornets not doing great as he running the Charlotte Hornets right now, even though he regards the greatest basketball player of all time. Doesn't necessarily translate in all cases, but I think Mark Davis can lean on Tom Brady's football acumen because he's played the game before. He's played it at a high level, and he was part of one of the most iconic, franchise runs of all time. So to have that to have that person to your shoulder and have that ear, I think it's a great addition for the Raiders front office. Tom Brady doesn't have to go in and make all the decisions, the personnel decisions to have an impact. Just his knowledge of the game, just what he's been able to accomplish, could be very valuable for a Raiders franchise that's looking to find its way again.
Yes, and even though he said he would be a passive owner, think about it. It doesn't matter if it's Jimmy Garoppolo or the next quarterback that's going to be their franchise quarterback whenever that person comes. The fact that they can call Tom Brady, I'm not saying Tom Brady's going to insert himself, but if Jimmy Garoppolo's struggling or they're doing something or whatever, he can ask. Brady ran the offense. He knows that offense like the back of his hand, clearly. So to have him just around or on the phone available to you, because he is part of the organization, is going to be valuable. Here's the one thing that I would recommend that Tom Brady do. Actually, it's two things. And I think this would win over the fan base instantly. Are you ready?
I'm ready for this.
Opening game Allegiant Stadium this year, which I think is week 3. You start off the intro video right before kickoff, and it's Tom Brady welcoming fans to Allegiant Stadium. They boo him. I get it. They're going to boo him. And then he says, by the way, Raider Nation, it was a fumble. Boom. All he's got to do is say it's a fumble, and they will love him instantly. I'm telling you. Even though he kind of did in that little thing he did with Woodson anyway. But nonetheless, if he did that, and then number 2, he should spend some time walking around to the tailgates at Allegiant Stadium and getting to know the black hole guys, all of the super fans. If he goes out and does a little bit of politicking, I think it changes overnight.
For some people, I think there are some people who are going to see through his politicking, and I think there are some people, and I've.
But if it's genuine,
look, I converse with some fans, and they're never Tom Brady people. It's like, no matter what Tom Brady does, he's not part of my franchise. He's not part of our culture. He's an outsider from here on in, because of not only just because of what happened. He's coming from a Patriots organization that a lot of fans felt like the Raiders could have been vaulted to prominence if that infamous game, that infamous play hadn't happened. So there are just some people, some fans, Raider fans in particular, who are never going to forgive Tom Brady for that, even though he didn't make the call. But because he was part of it, he benefited from it. They're always going to look at him as an outsider, no matter how hard he politics, no matter how many Raider babies he kisses, no matter how many hands he shakes. They're going to look at him as an outsider. And to your point, that would be a great start against the Steelers in their first home game. Him as a part owner coming out and just kind of
making a joke, but still
just making light of it. I totally understand that.
Yeah, and I've never been a Tom Brady fan as well, but I acknowledge the greatness, and I do think having him as part of the organization will help increase the positive image of the organization, right? Because I do think that his involvement in the NFL is always going to get a lot of attention. So Tom Brady will bring good attention to the Raiders. Now, if the Raiders don't succeed on the field over time and Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels don't succeed, doesn't matter who he is, it's not going to help. But I do think the presence of him in the Raider organization will be a net positive.
Scott, I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat for a minute. Just make believe this is a tinfoil hat for a quick moment, right?
Okay, got it.
So there are Raider fans who feel like the league is out to get them at every turn, right?
True.
And Mark Davis is viewed as an outsider because everyone calls him he's rich, but he's the poor among those owners, and he's kind of the outsider type. The way he handles business, the way he's more close to the fans than most owners are. People see Mark Davis as an outsider within his own fraternity of owners, NFL owners, that is, right? Tom Brady is viewed as kind of an insider. Oh, everyone loves Tom Brady. You hear stories all the time. Oh, you spend 5 minutes with Tom Brady, you love him. Even though you hate him for all the winning he's done, and he beat your team 28, came back on your team from down 28-3 and all of that stuff. When you meet Tom Brady, you love him. So Tom Brady is looked at as an NFL insider. So if that could also help the Raiders, because if there are situations where maybe the Raiders need some favor, hey, we got Tom Brady now. Our image is a little different now, but we're not the same Renegades from decades and years past. I know some fans hate to hear that, but let's be honest. The culture has shifted a little bit with Josh McDaniels, with Dave Ziegler, with Tom Brady now part of it. It's not the same Raider franchise that you grew up with in the 70s and 80s. It's just a different franchise. And as much as it pains me to say that growing up as a Raider fan, it's the truth. But I do think having Tom Brady there, him being looked at as an insider and well-liked within the league, I think that could help the Raiders out.
Well, that's the legacy. The legacy of Al Davis which is undeniable, unquestionable, amazing, and what made that franchise great. It was Al Davis. There's no question. Right. At the same time, I mean, I equate this. You guys all know I'm a UNLV alumni, right? So when Jerry Tarkanian was the coach of the Runnin' Rebels, and they were on top of the world of the college basketball, and they won a national championship in 1990, it was the same kind of, it was us against the world. If you ever watched the documentary on HBO about UNLV during those years, that's what it was about. No different than Al Davis. It's unfortunate that those two guys couldn't be alive in the same city at the same time. It would have been unbelievable. But like college basketball changed, the NFL has changed. And so that kind of fighting the system, all that stuff just doesn't happen anymore. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's the way it is, to your point about culture change. So that's what I think Tom Brady, and some people, you're right, will never like him. They'll hate that he's part of the organization, and that's their right. I got no problem with that. I'm not going to tell them how to fan, but I will tell you it will be a net positive for the organization, and we'll see how it all works out. But I'm just interested to see how fan views change if they do.
Here's how Tom Brady can gain favor with Raider fans who say never Tom Brady. If he's involved, now I know he said he has a path, he's going to have a passive role, but if he's involved in certain personnel decisions that work out and lead to wins, AFC championship appearances, Super Bowls, that's how you get the fans on your side. It all winning. Because ask most Raider fans, all they want to see is a winning football team, a good quality product on the field. If you win, things are good. When you're not winning and things are headed south, things are terrible. That's just the bottom line of it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there you go. Tom Brady on his way to becoming a Raiders owner, and he speaks about it, which is the first time he spoke about it. So I'll be interested to see if the Raiders do any media as the season approaches with Tom Brady when they get to camp, if he visits camp. It'll be interesting to see a Raider specific conversation where they delve into it and maybe get a little more out of him about what he thinks he might be able to do as part of the ownership group. It'll be fascinating. Whew. Anyway, all right, Mo. Well, interesting show, right? We're in the dead period of the NFL, but we roll on and have more. And of course, Thursday we'll be back. We'll have our mailbag segment as usual. We appreciate it. Send your comments and your questions to mail@silverandblacktoday.com. That's mail@silverandblacktoday.com. You can tweet at Mo, MOEMOTON on Twitter. You can also send your questions to me, LV Gully, or the show, SNB Today as well. And we'll get to those too. Mo, I know you mentioned your piece coming out tomorrow on Bleacher Report. What else you got going this week?
So first of all, as I mentioned in an earlier segment, Bleacher Report piece coming out on potential training camp holdouts. Obviously, Josh Jacobs is one of those players. And again, I'll go over what are the options he has, what are the options the Raiders have, and what is the realistic outcome of what's going to happen before July 17th or after it. Have another piece coming out on Sportsnet, just going over an overview of what to expect in training camp. You know, who's going to be a star at this position? Is Divine Diablo the guy at linebacker, or should the Raiders go out and still add a linebacker? If you listen to previous shows, you may have answers to that question. I have specific answers to it. But basically, it's just a close the curtain on the spring and a preview toward what's going to happen in the summer. Because as you said, there's going to be some off time for the players, but not us. We're still spinning the wheel, still working on some pieces, some quality content for the fans out there.
Oh, yes. We've got lots coming up here over the rest of June and into July, getting you prepared for camp. Some big guests coming down the road, and we'll share those with you soon. My friend, always a pleasure. We'll talk to you on Tuesday.
Sounds good. See you soon.
All right. So there you have it. That is Silver and Black today for this Tuesday. And we will be back with you on Thursday. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We thank you for being with us on YouTube as well. Thank you for the comments in the live chat. As always, lively. Thank you all for paying attention to us and giving us a little part of your day. We hope you have a great rest of the week. We'll talk to you on Thursday. For Mo Moton, I am Skockle Branson. This has been Silver and Black today. Take care, Raider Nation.